Good morning and good afternoon, good evening. My name is Rich Clark and I've been a hypnotherapist for the last 8 to 9 years and I've been a holistic therapist for the last 14 years. So today I'm going to talk about this topic is relationships and within that marriage. So for the topic of relationships, this is some of the common relationship issues in marriage we find when we're hypnotherapists, psychotherapists or cognitive behaviour therapy therapists. Try and say that in a mouthful. Anyway, so common relationship issues in marriage is the communication breakdown and conflict avoidance. So this communication breakdown is where people do not discuss their issues, how they feel and so forth. And the conflict avoidance is people then don't say anything because they're worried of affecting or upsetting the other half. Infidelity and trust issues and trust violations is a real big concern in most marriages, especially when hypnotherapy, when you're working with them. People believe that people, because if they're working away or they're not being communicative or they're not explaining things, people think there's infidelity. That usually can consider that because some people have been in a marriage before of infidelity or they've been in relationships where they have had a problem with their partner being trusted. Financial disagreements, probably another one, probably second to infidelity, is financial issues, where the person is, where they should be, where you want them to be, where your expectations are, is usually a really big issue. It's also something what actually comes up is interesting is when you're working with as a hypnotherapist is who's paying for the sessions. And you get that a lot, which is usually if they want the marriage to work, then they both will agree to and so forth. But this happens quite a lot. The intimacy and sexual concerns, and this is where a lot of marriages we're seeing in the media at the moment is people are worried or they have had a relationship longer than 10 years and they're saying now the actual relationship is now that some people end up being more like brother or sister or or siblings, not in a relationship. The sexual needs have gone in the relationship or they've not been adhered to. It's very common and it's actually something where that is working with people to do that. Because I've worked in couples therapy and done couples counselling and so forth. I've also put people to the right people to help with that outside of hypnotherapy. And your work-life balance struggles. This is something very common. This is work-life balance is that people end up working so hard because they're worried of the other person being neglected or so forth. So they end up working so much that they end up, that's all their life ends up being, and their relationship gets neglected. Sometimes people, they end up working too much in their relationship and their work suffers. So it can work both ways. So I'm going to explain a case study. I think this is important in a marriage, is a case study. This is Zara and James. And they've been married 8 years. Now, they sought therapy for communication issues and emotional distance. This was due to because James worked long hours in his job and he was also starting his own business and self-employment. So he was also not only just working his long normal hours, he was also building up his own business, and that was including networking. Now, Zara felt neglected and wanted this address. So because Zara felt neglected within this, she felt that her as a priority, she was actually not being adhered to and worked with. So this is where this conflict erupted and came from. So how do they deal with this? So through CBT and hypnotherapy, they address these patterns. So they address the negative thought patterns about each other's intentions. So intention is one of the biggest issues of the idea of like prejudice towards an idea, but the intention is about what they want. So a negative thought pattern is because they've gone through relationships before and had these issues happen, they think it's going to happen again that they're married. Whereas actually what you should have done is that if, technically before people get married, they should go through therapy, couples therapy or therapy before they get married to resolve these issues before you get into marriage. Because marriages are hard. They're not easy. I think people seem to think that marriage is going to be this like button. You click a finger and everything's going to be wonderful and there's going to be rainbows and unicorns. It's not how it works. It's very hard. Think of the wedding vows people do, till death do us part, through sickness and health. These are all reasons they do it because it can be a difficult time to deal with things. So anyway, childhood attachment patterns affecting current behaviour. So childhood attachment behaviour can be previous because their children have been brought up in divorce or brought up in a very fractious marriage. Also, the way they look at parenting or how they attach them to a parent, how they see a relationship, because sometimes see people in a relationship in rose-tinted glasses and so forth. But these do affect your current behaviour because this is where sometimes it's about dealing with these things and getting them resolved before you get married. But most people, unfortunately, don't do that. And then in the marriage, it comes up in different ways. Stress management and emotional regulation. So stress management is absolutely key in a marriage because you have to make sure when you're doing this in therapy, you have to work out what is stressful. So the person who's working, doing all that, like example, James in this, he's got a lot of stress. He's working, he's trying to get this to work and to push on and create a future. And there's Zara who's moaning and feels that she's been neglected. But then there's also an understanding and compromise within that, because most people want everything, but you only have a certain amount of hours in a day. You only have a certain amount of time. So at the end, this is allocation. And this goes into the next one, which is quality time prioritisation. So about how do you allocate quality time? So at work, you do your scheduling, you do your meetings, you do them things, and you hopefully try and keep that within the workplace, but sometimes you have to do networking and so forth. But also in a relationship, you have to allocate them times to that as well. So if it's a weekend that you don't answer your phone at work, you're just dealing with the relationship, and that is then your time with that person. So this is what most people would be doing. And, this would be my recommendations, and even going further ahead. Now, recent research shows this. In a 2023 case study in the Journal of Clinical Psychology, they found that integrative behaviour couples therapy, called IBCT, combined with mindfulness, which is pranayama, breath work, understanding diet and so forth, and exercise and the same rhetorical ideas, is reduced relationships to stress by 45% compared to just traditional CBT alone. The sample size in this study was 124 couples. So though I've recommended CBT and I've recommended that, I do also think there's a lot of hypnotherapy. There's a lot of other work you have to do within that. I think CBT alone just doesn't help that. But however, I'm going to give some of these techniques which will help. So this is what these methods would be used by therapists. So number one for CBT techniques is cognitive restructuring of relationship beliefs. Relationship beliefs and expectations are probably one of the biggest reasons why relationships have issues. And this idea of your belief, what you feel, what you're going into that relationship, what your expectations are. So it's not just belief, it's expectations. It's a huge issue in marriages. And I think it's getting that right. And that's just changing that pattern and changing the negative thoughts into actual acceptance, compromise, and where that's going to work. Communication skills training. A lot of people do not communicate properly in marriages. They don't communicate properly in their workplace. They do not communicate properly in their friendships. So if you don't do that already, then going into a marriage is going to be the same problems. That if they've been seen that only people communicate by shouting at each other, then they're not going to struggle really to be able to talk correctly. And talking helps. Talking about your feelings and working that out and working how that's going to work. And I think for men especially is listening to their wives or their partner. And I think also for women also to do the same. And if people in their partners with same-sex marriages, the same. Always be prepared to listen. And then that's where the communication develops. Behavioural activation for shared activity. So how do you share your activities? How do you work together? How do you work together to get a task done? Or basic things like cooking a meal, whatever that is. Not, it's your turn today, or them things. Trying to, work that out and compromise again, or just be planned and organised. Number two, hypnotherapy approaches, a bit more deeper, which is parts therapy for internal conflicts. And sometimes you have to work with not just the couples together, but singly. And that's where you find out the internal conflicts of why they have these issues and why these triggers keep happening. Very important to find out in the subconscious what's going on. The regression to identify relationship patterns. And the regression is about their previous relationships that have gone wrong and why these keep occurring in the new relationship. Because I guarantee that most people, I'd say 60-70%, is because they haven't dealt with the old issues they had because they didn't go to therapy to stop their issues happening in the current relationship. It's very common. It very happens a lot. People don't seem to think that therapy, to me, therapists should be about relationships, then getting into marriage and making sure that is then worked for having children and so forth, or whatever their organisational arrangement is. Future pacing for goal setting is about the idea of how do you pace these things. This would be used by future life progression to see what people want, what they want to achieve, what is their goal setting. Very important about that, especially in marriage, because you have to hit certain markers. And I think also social conditioning and family pressures do that as well, where sometimes you just got to give people their time. Sometimes it takes longer for people to own a house or own a business or whatever that is. Yeah, it's not, nothing's written in stone or carved in stone. Number three is the assessment techniques. So these are free assessment techniques. I don't use these, but I know people who do. It's the Gatman method relationship checkup. And then this one is a Diadak adjustment scale. And then the other one is attachment style questionnaires. So all these three are actually about what we do in relationships, and they can do that, and they can do these on their own. For myself, I think you should always be getting couples to write things down. What do they like in their relationship, what they don't, and things like that. So, for example, if someone in a couple is writing all negatives and there's not much positives, that's usually not a good sign. So you have to balance the scale, hopefully. And not every relationship is perfect. And when people say they've got perfect marriage, don't believe them, because no one has perfect marriage. It is, you have to work at it like everything else. So anyway, for the rest of this week, I'm going to be sharing videos about the fear of commitment, which I have done before, but you'll be seeing them. On Friday, Fridays and Fears, we're going to be sharing about fear of pregnancy and what that links to and how that also affects marriage. Then we're also going to be on Saturday, I'm going to be reposting the fear of love. And then on Sunday, I'm going to be doing a new post, which is the fear of abandonment. And that happens a lot in relationships because people are always worried about abandonment, especially if people go abroad to work or so forth. And obviously coming into the week after, which is Monday the 10th, starting will be the week of Valentine's week. So again, I'll be doing about the myth of Valentine's Day, where its origins are and how it works in different cultures. And then within that, I will be reposting clips I've done of previous videos, which is dating, marriage and divorce. And then also I'm going to be maybe redoing them as well in a different way of explaining other issues of what people deal with. So until next time, I shall speak to you soon. And if you are interested in any work with me to do with hypnotherapy or whatever that is, please do not hesitate to book a discovery call with me. And if you do message me on any platform this video is on, which is YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, there's plenty of them, please do not hesitate to email me and we can then set that up. At the moment, I'm actually going through the process of redoing my website. So at the moment, you can't do that on the website, but there is an email address or there is contact details you can do that too. Anyway, until next time.